We live. Hello, sup, hello. Hey, everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to the 10th episode of this. And hey, Craig and Rob are my guests. This is so cool. Thank you, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
We were originally going to be last week, and making cartoons is just a little too crazy sometimes. So
Yep.
hope everyone who could have made it last week and make it today. But yeah, we kind of just jump right in. If you guys want to maybe, just introduce yourselves a little bit, see what you worked on, what you've created.
Oh,
Rob?
Lord. Me first? Okay, well, I'm simpler than Craig. I only created one show. It's called My Life as a Teenage Robot.
Hey. Yeah,
Here she is. I'm just doing this because my background's so much more boring than Craig's is. All my toys are over here, off screen, next to the giant hay bin for my pet rabbit, so that will not be seen.
And that's a fully functioning Jenny, right?
Well, fully functioning, yeah, she flies, she does everything.
It's actually
Yeah, she's a fully functioning. That's how she fully functions like this. Her arm goes up and down. Also, these turn. Anyways, yeah, hi, I created My Life as a Teenage Robot. I've worked on a bunch of stuff, a lot of it with Craig, including a little bit on the Powerpuff Girls, not much. We both started on Dexter, and before that, Two Stupid Dogs. And then I worked with Craig's wife as the story editor on My Little Pony. I was kind of one of the people running both Gravity Falls and Big City Greens at Disney Television for a while, and then rejoined my old friend Craig at Netflix to work on Kid Cosmic.
And Mina and the Count.
But Mina and the Count, which never became a full-fledged show, which broke
I see
my
people in
heart.
the comments saying they love Mina.
I don't have any. I wish I had a Mina statue or a Count statue. That hasn't been made as of yet. So, but yes, Mina and Count, my firstborn. Yes, I created that series of shorts. Was hoping it would become a series, but it never did. So,
How many did you make? Was it 6?
made one at Hanna-Barbera, and then 5 more at. Was it 5? Yeah, 5 more at Nickelodeon. And then there should have been a 6th one in Nickelodeon, but they canceled it, and that's why Teenage Robot was made, because that slot went to the pilot for Teenage Robot.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Hey, Craig.
Hey, yeah, I'm Craig McCracken. I've been working in animation for almost 30 years now. First job was with Rob on Two Stupid Dogs, then Dexter's Laboratory. Then I created the Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, both at Cartoon Network. And then I went to Disney Television Animation for about 7 years and did Wander Over Yonder. And now I'm at Netflix Animation Studios producing Kid Cosmic with my old friend, Rob.
Great. And I'm already seeing questions that I'll skip over because we're just going to say right off the bat, they're asking, are you working on anything new right now? We're all 3 of us actually are on Kid Cosmic, which is Craig's next show.
What if we answered that question no, just to confuse everybody?
Yeah. We obviously can't talk much about it, but Craig, I think you might know as much as we can talk about it right now.
Yeah, we've been working on it since, when did I start at Netflix? I think I started there maybe early 2018. Does that seem right?
Yes.
So we've been working on it, and we were supposed to come out this year. That was the plan, but COVID sort of slowed everything down. And so animation production is just we've kept going, where a lot of live action production has stopped. Animation has kept going, but our productions have just slowed down. So we won't be out till next year, but we're insanely proud of the show. We really love the episodes, and it's the first time we've been able to do serialized storytelling. So instead of a lot of random 11 minutes or random 22s, it's like one giant movie. It's
a big movie, right?
And every episode flows into the next. It's super bingeable, and we're really proud of it, and we can't wait for people to see it.
Great. I can't wait I can't believe they haven't released any artwork or like what the characters look like yet.
Yeah.
But
Netflix has a whole strategy in place. They know what they're doing and how they release it. So I'm sort of, working with them, just like, you tell me how you want to talk about this. So yeah.
And I'm not just saying this because I work on the show, but to everyone, this show is gorgeous. it's like the most beautiful show I've seen you make, Craig. It's just like, it looks so good, and it kind of looks like grainy and filmy, sort of, like that, like good, like it doesn't look, too digital or anything like that.
Yes, the humans have made it. There's a human hand and a human touch in it. Yeah.
Well, I'm getting, I'm supposed to be getting texted questions, so I'm seeing if, oh my God, okay, we've got 20 questions already so far. We just jump right in. We'll just jump right in. Okay, James Tito or Tito.James asks, but both of you, what is your process for when you design your characters? Character design.
Well, Craig, you should start. You're more the character designer than I
am. Basically, I just start doodling. I mean, there's no process other than drawing and trying to figure out the essence of a character, and you kind of draw it and just work on shapes and figure out proportions and things like that. Also, one thing I try to keep in mind is when I'm developing a show, I always think about the tone of the show. Like, is it really cartoony? Is it a little more grounded in reality? Where like Kid Cosmic, for instance, is grounded more in reality. So when I was thinking about character designs, I started looking at like Hergé, who did Tintin, and Hank Ketchum, who did Dennis the Menace, and trying to find a form of cartooning that felt a little more human and grounded. But when I was designing Wander Over Yonder, we wanted that show to be super broad and super cartoony. So when I was designing the characters, I kind of tried to design them in a more cartoony way. But one of the exercises I do when I'm designing characters is once I find a drawing or a design or an essence of a character that I like, the next thing I will do is start drawing them in shorthand, little doodles as fast as I can, almost as if I'm doing storyboard drawings, because what will happen, your hand will naturally evolve the design and eliminate stuff that you don't need to draw. And so I kind of like do that over and over again, because it forces your brain and your hand to simplify the character to its essence. So that's sort of like a exercise I go through, is just doodling the characters as fast as I can, and then that sort of becomes the model.
That's great. I've never heard of that technique. I'm going to try it.
Yeah, well, that's what natural, like when we were on Dexter's Laboratory, I designed Dexter's, the first version. He started out like this, but then as everybody boarded him, he just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and became a box, because that was more iconic. And so that became the new model for Dexter.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I learned that, like, oh, put these characters through their paces a bit before you finalize the design.
And just really quick, I just saw someone in the chat asking, will these videos be available after the stream? Yes, they'll be up for free on the CTN channel, just so you know.
The only thing I would add to what Craig said, and this comes from the fact that I'm not as good a designer as Craig and not even close to it. One, if I'm designing a character, I usually would want someone who I think is more competent to do the final design, which is what I did on Teenage Robot. I know a lot of people love the look of that show, and I'm partly responsible for that, but I have to give credit to Alex Kerwin, who was my art director on Teenage Robot, because we developed the characters together and he made them look fantastic. So I'm not naturally a character designer, though I do step into that role and have some influence there. But because I'm not as good as Craig or the other people I know in the industry, one thing I do is I try to look at the actual thing. If I'm designing a character based off of something that actually exists, obviously, Teenage Robot was about a robot. Robots don't really exist, at least not in this sense. But if I was looking to design something from reality, I would look at that I would look at reality and look at what reality looks like. Even if you're going to design a character super cartoony, sometimes the actual real thing can influence you in a way that you wouldn't expect. I think there's a tendency in our industry to kind of, Xerox a cartoon, which is a Xerox of an earlier cartoon, which is a Xerox of an earlier cartoon. And I love cartoons as much as anybody who works in the industry, but I feel like it's good to bring in an influence that isn't cartoons in and of itself into your design process, and look at what things look like in real life, and as well as looking at illustrators that influence you or that you love outside of the animation industry, like Craig had mentioned, with Tintin and other things like that, which aren't strictly animation.
Gotcha. Cool. That's what I do too. I initially design my characters, then I hand it off to someone 100 times more talented than me, and I'm like, make this work, you know. And from Alexander, this is for Craig. How is it difficult to slightly alter your art style for every show you've done?
Not really, because I mean, the essence of drawing a design you can apply to anything. So again, it goes back to the tone. What is the vibe of the show? What do I want it to feel like? And I'm not a musician, but I would liken it to playing in different musical styles. You know, the essence of it is the same. So when I'm drawing, you know, it's just, if I want the show to look UPA or Hanna-Barbera or whatever my influences are, I just kind of analyze that kind of design style and see what makes it work. And so it's just a matter of kind of adapting that. And your own natural hand is going to come out anyway, because you're drawing it. So there's going to be similar connective tissue to whatever show you're working on. But you sort of just, you kind of figure out the tone and the feel that you want it to look like. And then you just sort of try to emulate that style as best as you can.
Cool. And for both of you, I think this is the main question of the whole stream, is how did you both go from being, I'll try to word this, how did you both go from working on other people's shows to finally working on your own shows?
Well, it's a little bit of luck, and a little bit of being at the right place at the right time. We both started working at Hanna-Barbera together, and there just happened, Fred Seibert, who was the president when we got hired there, worked on a show that was pre-existing called Two Stupid Dogs, and we were both, Craig was a designer, I was a board artist. And while we were at that studio, Fred Seibert started what became the What a Cartoon Shorts program. And, you know, we had both done, you know, student films that we thought had potential to be series. And we just basically pitched what was our second year CalArts student film as a possible show. And that was Powerpuff for Craig. It was Mean in the Con for me. Mean it didn't go to full series, but doing that and doing other ideas eventually led to my series. So it's a little bit about time. It's a little bit of timing. It feels like it's a given now that you can have your own show. Back when we were doing those pilots and when we got our show, that wasn't a given. Most people went into the industry. A lot of our peers disappeared into feature animation, never to be seen again, meaning they got a job as part of a crew, and some of them became directors and some of them created their own films eventually. But we just took a different route and went into TV. And at that point, the way the industry was going, there was an opportunity for us to do a pilot and make that pilot become a show. You know, now that kind of hunger for fresh talent and for fresh ideas is just kind of a feature of the industry that's kind of ongoing, but at that time it wasn't. So a little bit of it is proving to the people that make these decisions that you're not only good, but reliable, and that you have the wherewithal to make your own show, because it's not about talent, and it's not about ideas. It's really about endurance, because it's just a huge task to create your own show. You may think you have these characters, I have so many ideas for them. I know I can tell so many stories with these characters, and that may be true. Can you come up with those stories maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, for the next year, or however many episodes you have? It's a little less intense now because luckily we've got these shorter orders with Netflix, where we're not having to do 26 half hours at once, or 13 half hours at once, and doing 2 shorts in that amount of time. It's just a lot of stories over a short amount of time. So the ability to kind of keep going and keep going and keep going, that's really the best quality you can have if you want to create a show. And it's not something you know until you're actually doing it.
Yeah, and one of the things, to work off what Rob was saying, Rob and I ran the Cartoon Institute at Cartoon Network for a while, where it was an incubator development department. We were reaching out for new show creators and new showrunners. And one of the best places to look for potential future showrunners is look to the board artists on other shows, because board artists are the ones who have to think about the shots, the storytelling, getting it down into 11 minutes, to write the jokes, to be able to draw, to be able to tell a story. on paper that can be translated to film. So we always looked to the board artists for who would maybe be the potential next, great showrunners. And like Rob said, I was able to do my Powerpuff shorts at Cartoon Network, and we did 2 Powerpuff shorts and we did 2 Dexter shorts, and those were sort of basically done by myself, Gendy Tartakovsky, and Paul Rudish. The 3 of us sort of did those together. Then Dexter's ended up getting picked up first, and when Dexter got picked up, I was the art director and one of the main storyboard artists on Dexter's Laboratory. And the reason Powerpuff got picked up is because I had done so many boards on Dexter's Laboratory for those first 4 seasons that Linda Semensky and Mike Lazo at Cartoon Network had seen my work and said, Craig's boards are really good. Let's give him a shot at doing Powerpuff as a series. So like getting in as a board artist is a really great entry level to just feel how what the industry's like and what you're going to need to be a showrunner.
Great, yeah. I also wanted to just point out, my whole life, I thought the entire What a Cartoon thing was so well done because it was just giving so many different artists a shot, putting it on TV and seeing what the audience liked and what the audience responded to the most, they gave them series. And it feels like there's kind of an imitator since then, but it seems like right now there's nothing really like that.
Well, that's what we tried to recreate with Cartoon Institute. The way we ran Cartoon Institute is we'd go after artists that we thought had potential to make a show, said, do you have an idea? They'd pitch us an idea, and Rob and I would go to a storyboard. Mm-hmm. Go to a storyboard and come pitch the storyboard. We sort of thought it's like American Idol. Yeah. You come in and you perform and you sell your cartoon, you sell your idea, and you sell it to a room of executives. And then what we would do is after they would leave the room, we would get together with the one executive and the kind of brain trust of artists going, do we want to make this one or we don't want to make this one? And if we wanted to make it, we said, you got a short. It happened immediately, which is what a cartoon was like. It was, for all of us to get those shorts, we all had to just do a board. We had to do a board and go and pitch it to the networks, the executives from Atlanta. And if they liked what they did, we made the cartoon.
And were there two Powerpuff shorts before the series? Okay.
Yeah.
Same with Dexter.
Yeah.
Dexter's.
Yeah. And I only did one Meaning in the Cat at Hanna-Barbera, but then I was able to move up. Fred switched from Cartoon Network over to Nickelodeon and did the same kind of program there. And that's why I did 5 more of them at Nickelodeon, because I was able to take the idea with me, because it got passed on as a series at Cartoon Network.
Glad that there are shorts at least.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I mean that's a whole long story, which is nobody's asking about. So we'll pass it by.
It might be sent to me, but I saw someone asking for Rob, and then I just saw Mina, so some kind of question about Mina might be coming.
There's a lot of heartbreak involved there, but I'm very proud of it and very happy that people still remember it to this day. So that warms my heart.
From Lass, whenever hosting, whenever having, I guess, a writer's room, how often is there one writer who disagrees on something and you guys had to redo the whole thing or redo something? Are there ever disagreements in the writer's room is the question, I think.
I mean, there's always disagreements, but luckily you usually have an odd number of people that can vote if need be. And, obviously when Craig is the creator or I'm the creator, we have veto power over anything. But if you have a room full of people that you trust and everybody's telling you something that you don't agree with, even as the creator, usually you could be swayed by a room full of people whose opinions you trust. Right. If one person doesn't like what's going on, what you want to do is kind of stop and just double check your assumptions and double check whether the idea holds water that person's objecting to, and maybe talk through things and see if what they're really objecting to is smaller than the whole idea and something that you guys can change and come to agreement about. Mm-hmm. Usually that kind of very, very strong disagreement doesn't usually happen in the writer's room, and when it does, it's definitely worth stopping.
I've never seen writers fighting and yelling at each other because they don't disagree on something. It doesn't get that juicy, everybody.
Yeah, anybody that's going to be that kind of jerk, usually you try and have in your
usually
your writer's room to begin
you
with.
probably shouldn't be in a writer's room, exactly. I don't know, Craig, did you want to add anything? Or?
No, well, we try to run a really diplomatic writer's room where everybody can contribute, but we spend a lot of time really figuring out the episode in the room. Like we take maybe 2 days, because that's like the foundation of the story. If you don't get that right, that's like pouring concrete and laying the foundation of a building. If you don't have the story solid, anything you build on top of it's going to fall apart. So we really take a lot of time to figure those stories out. Mm-hmm. We put up cards and we break down everything. It's basically the whole episode except for dialogue. Mm-hmm. And then as we've been working through it and we talk through it, we'll review it at the end of it. And if hopefully everyone's on the same page and feel like it's working. Right. But like Rob said, the people you hire are people that you have a creative connection with. When we're auditioning people or hiring people, you look for people that kind of think the same way and can contribute, Yeah.
It's I don't know if it's rare, but I've never really heard of writers' rooms where they're like all meeting for the first time and they don't really know each other or have worked together before.
And one thing that I always look for, and Rob always looks for as well, is looking for writers who think visually, because it's one of my favorite sayings is show it, don't say it. So I want to make sure that you could turn the sound off on our cartoons and still follow what's going on. And so we're always looking for writers who, in their scripts, they can tell a story with just describing the action and not the dialogue.
Gotcha. Cool. From Max, I am interested in creating my own animated series in the near future. If you could pick only one thing, what is the most important thing when it comes to creating and running your own series?
Characters, great, likable characters that resonate with audiences. That's the most important things. Concepts will get you to try out a show, to tune into a show maybe, but concepts don't keep you watching over and over again. If you're not engaged with the characters and the personalities of the characters, you're not going to continue to watch that show.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing.
I always think of it as like, would I want to hang out with these characters or, right. Watch more episodes than there are of them?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I'm kind of fielding the questions as I read them. Okay. From Lass, have either of you ever assigned let me read this, sorry. Have either of you ever assigned a book as part of some sort of homework assignment for your writers and or animators so that they would get an idea on what like a Bible, I think is what he means. So they would get an idea on what the show is like, what the episode or the theme is like. I think he's talking about a Bible. Sorry if I'm not understanding the question, Lass.
I think there's two ways to answer that question. One is, and Craig, you can speak to this because this is Craig's Bible in terms of telling stories, which is Save the Cat, which is a writer's book. I think maybe I can't tell. Maybe the question is about like a particular episode, if there's an episode that's influenced by a book or something like that. But it depends on the show. Sometimes you'll do like, this is going to be our film noir episode, or this is a takeoff on Alice in Wonderland. And obviously, if a particular episode of a series is that heavily influenced by something, obviously the person who's going to contribute to the creation of it should be familiar with the source material. But I feel like that kind of strict adherence to pre-existing material is really just in the realm of parody. And there are things that influence any series, pre-existing properties or pre-existing genres that influence a series. But I think any series that's worth its weight needs to kind of go beyond whatever inspired it and become its own thing. Certainly on Teenage Robot, we did episodes which were heavily influenced by, certain sources and whatever. But in general, the show just had the influences that came through me and the experiences I had and the things that I liked. But in terms of like how you format a story, Craig is very heavily influenced by Save the Cat. And if Craig should talk about that at all.
Yeah, when I first read that book, it wasn't like, oh, these are great ideas. It was just a way to articulate what my gut was telling me for years about storytelling. And I was just like, oh, this is sort of, it's like a little puzzle. And we do a modified one. We're not like religious about it. You know,
Right.
We sort of use it just as a template to just kind of help structure stories a little bit. But if the question was more about like, do you try to create a Bible when you start a show? Yeah, absolutely. We'll create a Bible that talks about the characters and the tone of the show and what we're trying to pull off with it, and sample episode ideas, and to give to people when they're starting on a show a sense of what we're all trying to do. You know, that's always one of the hardest things to do when you're starting a new show, especially when you're pitching a show. I have found when I pitch a show, I always like to try to present something to the network. Because if you're just verbally telling somebody, you're at the mercy of them making a version of your show in their head, and they may be saying no to the thing they're thinking of, not what I intend to make. So I always try to have some sort of an example. So when I pitched Powerpuff, I had my student film. At least I could go like, this is the vibe of it and the tone of it. With Foster's, I filled a room with artwork and inspirational stuff, so you could just see the characters interacting. I had like a 60-page graphic novel that I didn't finish for Wander Over Yonder that I presented to Disney. Like, you could read this and get a feel for it. And when I was able to present Kid to Netflix, I actually had an animatic of an episode, so I didn't have to pitch it at all. I just said, watch.
Great, yeah.
And that, like, that's the best, because it's like, do you like this thing? Do you want me to make more of these things? So
there you go.
Having that is really good, because you sometimes are at the mercy of someone else's interpretation of your intent.
Good to
And
know.
the only thing I would add to that is that, yeah, you do usually have to create a Bible, and it's usually such a jumping off point for the show that it like, you can't be afraid of deviating from it once you actually start making the show and you discover things about the characters that you never saw coming in the Bible, and the things that you thought would be important about the characters really don't factor in. Like, it's not really a promise to your audience because the audience has never seen this document. It's a sales device, but it's kind of like, you know, writing a paragraph to describe a painting that you're going to paint. Like, it's not the same medium. Of course, there's writing when you do an animated show, and you may be scripting that show, or you may be doing outlines and then discovering it on the board. But either way, it's not the same thing as actually doing the show. So the Bible's just really a jumping off point, and a way to start trying to synthesize and coalesce the ideas that you have for this idea. But like what Craig said in the examples he had, like, that's why we did these shorts, because even a pilot of your idea is such a better explanation of what the show is going to be than a pilot could ever be. I mean, than a Bible could ever be.
Yeah.
Cool. Anna or Anna asks, in your roles and responsibilities as a showrunner, do you focus on specific creative ideas for the show, or do you try and take on a little bit of everything? So since you're the overseer of the show.
Yeah, well, the nature of running a show is you are going to see everything. I mean, everything passes your desk, and you're
the thumbs up.
You're going to say yes or no to everything, or give direction on everything. But the one thing I've always tried to do is I try to find people that I can collaborate with that I trust implicitly, and I love their work and the way they do things, where I can say, okay, you go art direct this show, and if I can't see your work because I'm too busy with something else, I know it'll be great. So it's great to partner with somebody and have a crew of people that you love working with and you trust what they do. And it's as much as, you know, Rob and I are the creators of the show, or the showrunners, making these things is truly, truly a collaborative effort. It's, you know, and like Rob was saying, you have your idea in your Bible and what you want your show to be. But over the years, I've learned to accept the fact that it's going to morph into its own thing because all these different people with different skill sets and different talents are touching it and working on it and building it and sculpting it together, that you have to be open to allowing it to become its own thing. It may be different than what you had in your head originally, but that's the beauty of the creative collaboration, is together we can make something better. But one thing I've always tried to do with my show is, because the reason I do this is I love being creative. I love making up things. I love drawing. I love writing stories. And sometimes you could easily slip into a supervisor role where you're just a rubber stamp. You're like, yes, no, and you're not in the trenches getting your hands dirty making stuff. So I've always tried to carve out a chunk of my shows to where I can be hands-on, and that's usually in story meetings and writing scripts and or doing the storyboards. At least on Powerpuff, it was doing boards and writing simultaneously. Then I switched to scripts, but it's doing those scripts, writing those scripts, and working on the character designs, so I can feel like at least I'm getting in there and getting my hands dirty and getting to make it, and allowing other people to do other aspects of it. But you know, you get kind of depressed if you just become the rubber stamp. You know,
Sure.
I make stuff.
Cool. I really like this question from Laura. Now more than ever, what do you think kids need from cartoons?
Rob, do you want to? You have I mean,
you know, here's what I'll say. I think, obviously, the world always needs laughter. The world always needs stories. I think we are hardwired as a species to want to hear and tell stories to each other. And even people that don't consider themselves storytellers are telling stories every day. They're telling their significant other what happened to them that day. You know, they're relating their experience. So, I mean, I think the storytelling aspect of cartoons and animation is what everybody always needs. Do they need more than that? Do they need cartoons that speak to the social issues of the day? Sure. The way that gay and transgendered people and bisexual people and all that are now emerging as characters inside of cartoons, that's something Craig and I could never have dreamed of, let alone try to pull off when we started 30 years ago. That is going to influence kids in a way that is so positive for the future of the world, in my opinion, obviously. So do cartoons bring more to the table than just great storytelling and laughs? They can. I don't think any cartoon's required to do that. I just think that the more cartoons can contribute to culture and advancing the culture, the better. I don't think they should be written off as kids' entertainment or lesser than live action, because they can be so significant in children's lives and adults' lives even. So, God, what do we need from cartoons? We need to be told stories that resonate with us and that touch us.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you for that. Okay. From Galen, this is for Craig. I'm so glad Powerpuff Girls was targeted at kids because it was one of my all-time favorite childhood shows. But what would have been different if you'd have kept the original title from your college pilot and had it on something like Adult Swim?
Yeah, well, originally the Powerpuff Girls were originally called the Whoop-Ass Girls, and it was sugar, spice, everything nice in a can of Whoop-Ass, and that was the accidental ingredient. But, you know, I've thought about this. My brain is not wired to think of adult stuff. I just don't think that way. And Powerpuff, we never made it for kids. We made it for all ages, you know, just like the cartoons we grew up watching, you know, Looney Tunes and Rocky and Bullwinkle and stuff, like shows that were made for everybody but have like a kid-like spirit to them. And yeah, that was the target audience, but we never sat down and went like, well, what's a kid gonna like? Mm-hmm. You know, we always just were like, what did we like when we were kids and why did we like it? And let's just try to make more of that. So my brain is just not wired into the edgy adult stuff. The stuff they have on Adult Swim is amazing and it's great, but I don't think that way. I like making stuff for all ages, And Powerpuff was pretty edgy to be
sure. Yeah.
We got away with a lot of stuff.
I mean, a lot of violence, cartoon violence. But yeah. I always remember, I can't remember the episode. I remember one shot where Buttercup or someone threw something through a monster's face.
Bubble Vicious, yeah.
Out the back of his neck.
Yeah. Bubbles didn't like being called cute, so she went to the danger room and put it to 11. And the thing I found out, I didn't find this out till years later, because we were getting away with a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And I was like, how is this okay? And I found out years later, there were standards and practice notes that came through Cartoon Network. The executives at Cartoon Network just never sent them to us. They were like, we're not going to tell them to take that out. The show's too great. We're just going to let it go. So we just didn't know. They were somebody wanted to stop us.
Yeah, in the theme song, him gets kicked and there's blood coming from his mouth. Yeah. Another question from last. For my favorite cartoonist, Mr. Renzetti, when co-directing an episode of My Life as a Teenage Robot, how was it to work with another person who had as much control as you in the directing department? Loved the show.
Thank you. Well, credits in cartoons are a little bit iffy and squishy. What those credits really meant on Teenage Robot was that there was someone else who, now we're going to get in the weeds, and I'll try and keep this as simple as possible for people who don't know what I'm talking about. There's things called exposure sheets, which are frame-by-frame instructions for the overseas animators about what to do. So if you got a character here, and they got to move to here, the X sheet basically tells them how many frames you have to get over there. So it could be slow, it could be fast, whatever. So the director that I'm usually co-credited with is the person who do the X sheets. I would give them an initial pass at the timing, then they would do the exposure sheets, and I would review those exposure sheets. So that's what the directors did on Teenage Robot, my co-directors. For me, I got the directing credit basically because I oversaw everything else, including those X sheets. I would look at the character designs, I would look at the storyboards and make changes to the storyboards. I was always the last hands that the storyboards passed through, similar to what Craig did on Powerpuff. So it was just a kind of catch-all credit to give both someone who technically was doing the simple job of directing the timing of the animation, and me, who was doing a more general job of not only overseeing that, but kind of directing all the other aspects of the cartoon. We weren't really co-equal. I was always supreme, if you want to put it that way. I mean, it was always me who made the last choices in every department of my show, obviously, as you do as the creator, which is the pleasure and the burden of running your own show. Everything is on your shoulders.
I'm going to tell everyone right now, questions are sadly cut off. We have way too many questions before 6 o'clock. So
cut off.
Yeah, we have at least 60 questions so far.
I better take, if we're talking until 6 o'clock, I better take a drink.
Sure.
A large bottle of water.
We're almost halfway done. It kind of flies by. So, okay. From Max, when it comes to creative control over your own project, how often is it a struggle to keep it your own vision? And I suppose that might depend on what studio you're working for.
Yeah, it does depend on the studio, definitely, for sure. But like I said earlier, you have to just be open to the fact that it's going to take on a life of its own, and embrace that the collaboration you're going to be involved in with other people is going to be the product that you make. I try not to work for places that are going to dictate to me what they want my shows to be. It's just like, well, you've hired me for a reason. Mm-hmm. I've been making shows for a while, and if you like the type of shows I make, I'll make shows for you. And when I'm working at a studio, I do try to get a sense of well, what are you looking for? I'm not one of these people who sees the executives as the enemy or whatever. I mean, it's their money that they're investing in me, and the network has a a goal and something they're trying to achieve. And I always want to go, well, what are you looking for? How do you want this to feel? And I can work within that. You know, I'm not going to just completely change my idea to fit like the needs of a brand or something like that. But you know, I'm open to hearing what, you know, when we did Powerpuff, we did the Powerpuff movie. And after the Powerpuff movie, there was kind of a new regime change that came in to Cartoon Network. And I could tell that like the tide was turning a little bit. They maybe didn't want to be as edgy. They wanted to be a little more family friendly. So I kind of developed Foster's with that in mind a little bit, just kind of seeing the climate of the studio and where it was going. And I was like, oh, I have this idea I think could fit in with, you know, where they're trying to take Cartoon Network, you know.
And I would say, just to add to that, that there's a the idea that that there's a struggle to keep it your own. Like Craig said, it's going to evolve on its own. But there's definitely a differentiation between the artists you're working with and you're collaborating with, and the execs that are overseeing the show. But with the best execs, they are a collaborator in a lesser sense of the word, in that they're the first kind of outside person you're pitching anything to. Because in most cases, most of the shows that we've worked on, there's some sort of pitch, whether it's in person or you send them an animatic. There's some sort of exec that's supervising your show that's going to give you feedback on every single episode. And sometimes the best of them will raise questions with you and not offer solutions, but raise questions or problems that they have. Like, I didn't really understand this part. And the first reaction of any artist is like, well, because you're a jerk and you're dumb. But that's usually not the right answer. The right answer is like, well, I'm not getting something across I'm not getting across what I'm trying to get across. So what am I doing wrong? How can I fix it? So it's not really about having a fight to keep your vision. It's more just about making sure you're communicating things in the way you want to communicate them. Now, the best execs, again, will do something that seems counterintuitive. They'll like if you say no to them, if you stand up to them for a principled reason, because no, my character would not do that. That's not who that character is. They want to know that you have a strong perspective on your show and that you know who your characters are, because that will make for better cartoons and better stories. If you're just like, okay, what do you want? What do you want me to do this week? Okay, yeah, I'll do that. The best execs don't want that from you. Mm-hmm. And usually, hopefully, you get a good exec who's working with you. Sometimes there's bad execs who try and impose their vision. I don't know about Craig. I've never had that experience. I had good execs on my show when I was doing Teenage Robot. And the execs that might do that to you are kind of 3 or 4 steps removed, and the execs that are closer to your show can kind of buffer and protect you from that, like similar to what Craig was saying about Powerpuff, how he didn't get some of the notes that would have ruined the show, because the execs that were the good execs that were close to the show knew that those notes were not good for the show.
Yeah, we actually got notes on a Foster's Christmas special we did, and there was like a scene in there that originally was really heavy. Like, it was really like, whoa, we're going to go there with Christmas and we're going to let kids know that about Santa Claus? Okay. And their solution was, can you put more jokes in it to just lighten the mood? And I'm like, well, we don't have time and the jokes aren't going to do it. The issue you have is this one scene and this one line. So if I just take that out, the whole mood of the whole thing lightened. But the Cartoon Network solution was like, put more jokes in it so it feels better. I'm like, no, I know what the problem is. We went a little too far with this one sequence, and we'll just kind of pull back on that. But what was great is they allowed Lauren and I to make that adjustment, as opposed to like, well, they told us to put jokes in, so put jokes in. We were able to push back and go, no, that's not going to solve your problem.
Gotcha.
This will.
Yeah. And just to quickly add to what Rob was saying, I think animation fans in general, and on the internet, are just wired to think executives equal bad. All executives. Mm-mm. And that's not the case. Obviously, there might be, a few that don't know what they're doing. But for them, every executive I've ever worked with, I have agreed with their notes, and they've always been super nice. And so, I don't know, I kind of get annoyed when I see people online going like stupid executives, or like,
right.
people who aren't
And the best ones are fans. I mean, they love cartoons. They love cartoons as much as we do. Mike Lazo and Linus Saminsky at Cartoon Network are huge cartoon fans. And so they appreciated what we were able to do, and they liked our work. And there's lots of people at Disney TVA who are fans of cartoons, and you're lucky if you can work with those people who really love this art form and want to contribute to it.
And
so in reality, execs are your friends.
Well, one thing that occurred to me, and part of this is me just speculating, because Craig and I had very little experience in feature animation.
Mm-hmm.
Feature animation, you're working on one story for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and that story is going to have one iteration. It's going to come out in the theater, and either it's going to be a success or it's going to be a flop. So the execs that are overseeing features, they know they've got one chance, and I think and if it takes that long to get one feature out, they may be fired if that feature isn't a success. So there's a lot of the eggs in one basket, and I think there you might get more interference from execs because of the amount of fear that's breathing down their neck for your feature idea, which is a reason why you see so many sequels to successful features, because that's less of a gamble for them. In TV, they're not buying one story, they're buying a cast of characters and the stories that are going to come from those cast of characters. So one particular story, if even they're not quite sure about it, it's just one time at bat in a very long game where you're going to have many more at bats to win over your audience and make them love your characters. So there's less pressure for each story to be perfect, both from the exec side and from the creator side. You want all your stories to be good, but if this one isn't great, you've got another chance, and you can learn from what you did wrong in that episode to do the next one better.
Cool. Anonymous, no name. I really admired creative couples, Ian and Rebecca Sugar, Dana Terrace and Alex Hirsch, and Craig and Lauren. What's it like having a creative partner? Are there ups and downs as a couple of creatives?
It's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, every idea that I come up with or Lauren comes up with, either one of us is the first person to hear about it. And we're always sharing ideas. Now, one thing that I can do, and I have to just kind of watch myself, is sometimes Lauren will be pitching me an idea, and I get really excited about new ideas. And so I start going like, oh, you could do this, and you could do this. And she'll be like, stop figuring it out for me. Stop making it just, did you like it? And I'm like, yes, it's great. It's great. Go do your thing. Sorry, I like it so much. I'm just getting excited about it. So that can definitely happen sometimes. But it's fantastic. It's fantastic to have somebody you're that close to that you can kind of, we just speak the same language, So when she's working on a project and she's stuck on something, or she's done an animatic and she can show it to me, it's just great to have that creative collaboration with someone that you love. I mean, she's the love of my life, and we love the same thing. But I kind of always knew that would happen. I knew I would end up with somebody who was artistically minded, and and we'd want to do the same stuff.
Yeah. Rob question from Alexander. I love Life as a Teenage Robot. As a kid, and Jenny was my first crush. How hard was it to blend the art styles of Art Deco and Osamu Tezuka?
Again, I have to give credit to Alex Kerwin, my art director, and the other artists, a couple of key other artists I want to mention that worked on my show. Joseph Holt was the background designer, and Sana Hong was our lead. The lead. We also had the amazing Chris Sieriotis, who we're working with on Kid Cosmic, came in second season and worked on Teenage Robot as well. And then Sana Hong, who was my lead, BG Paint. It was not hard. It was just kind of like looking at the influences that we wanted to bring into things, and kind of taking little influences here and there. But then I had these very capable artists whose hands we could run that kind of blender of ideas through and come up with the look of the show. Alex and I are both huge fans of 1930s animation, but we know we didn't want to do just a rubber hose kind of style of for our show. And so we knew we wanted to try and come up with something that was a little different and a little bit, I don't want to say more sophisticated because that's putting down 1930s animation, which I absolutely love, but just a little bit different. You know, UPA was also an influence on me, a huge influence on me, which is more strictly there in the Mean and the Count shorts. But you know, like Craig said earlier, like everybody has all these influences. They kind of just get synthesized through your hands as you create something. So, and as it is, it was a collaboration with me and Alex and these other people that I mentioned, and we all of our hands kind of together, kind of figuring out what we wanted the show to look like.
Yeah, and Alex was also the art director on Wander Over Yonder as well. And he's just, you know, he's an amazing, amazing talent and comes from an artistic family.
Yep.
And everyone in that family is creative and is really good. And he's like this little, like, that's the wrong word. He's like this cartoon scientist. He's able to just like dissect what works about certain styles of design and understand it from just like a drawing standpoint and break it down to the essence. He's currently designing the new Looney Tunes shorts, and he was able to just get in there and like go, well, here's the essence of this era of Bugs Bunny and why it worked and why that design works. And he just has a brain that's wired that way. So when Rob says Tezuka and Art Deco, he's like, all right, I know this is what we need to do. And he's just brilliant at it. He's just really incredible. He's one of those exceptional talents who can just, you know, get in there. And when we were doing Wander Over Yonder, it's like there was this preschool show from I'm blanking on where it was. It was from Zagreb film. It was called Professor Balthazar, and it was just this beautiful kind of psychedelic stuff. And I was saying I wanted to sort of look like that and like 30s cartoons, and then he was just able to break that down into its essence and come up with, you know, the design style for Wander Over Yonder.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I've met him.
Alex Kerwin?
I don't think so. Not yet.
We'll wait till 2021 or 2022
Yeah.
to introduce you. Safe to do so.
A question for both of you from, I'm so sorry, Rossum. Did you both went to Cal Arts? How did Cal Arts boost your creativity for your work? And I would like to add to this question, if you found yourselves going to somewhere else beyond Cal Arts, do you think the outcome would have come out differently? Or what was special about Cal Arts?
Well, I've always said when I was in high school, I was one of two people who could really draw, and who also wanted to pursue art as a career. I was the only one that liked cartoons. And so I was by myself. So when you go to Cal Arts for the first time, you finally are meeting your people.
Yeah.
You're finding all these other people who also love cartoons and also have been drawing their whole lives. And they're all at really great levels. And so you just have to up your game. And even though Cal Arts is about the faculty and the school and the classes you're taking, the real collaboration and the growth as an artist comes from those friendships that you make. I mean, Rob and I have known each other for going on 30 years now, and we've been creatively collaborating since we met at Cal Arts, you know, and you sort of find like-minded people. Like when we were there was a group of people who they wanted to be Disney animators. Like that was their goal. They were like, I want to go animate on Disney features. And then there was this other group with myself and Rob and Gendy and Conrad Vernon and Miles Thompson and a lot of other people. We were more into cartoons. Like we like Looney Tunes and Rocky and Bullwinkle. And so we wanted to get into animation because of that. And so we all just sort of gravitated together and started just inspiring each other and working off each other. But, you know, I don't know if things would have been different if we hadn't attended Cal Arts, but I have worked with many, many people in the industry who didn't go to CalArts and didn't go to an art school and got into the industry another way, and are some of the best people we've ever worked with. And so that's not.
Alex Sherman was one of those people. He never went to art school.
Yeah,
he went to an art high school for a couple of years, but then he just came out here and started working.
Yeah, he get a job when he was like 16. No, it was maybe.
There was a storyboard contest that Cartoon Network was doing, and he didn't win it. He came in second place, but Larry Huber, who's an old producer that Craig and I worked with on Two Stupid Dogs and on the shorts, brought him out because he saw such talent in him. So he visited out there, and then I think he did some work on Johnny Bravo for a while. And then Alex and I met when we both moved over to Nickelodeon to do the What a Cartoon. I'm not a What a Cartoon. Cartoons. That series of shorts. Alex actually did a short of his own and worked on mine, and that's when we started collaborating. And I remember at the time he was debating whether he should keep working in the industry or go back and go to school and go to CalArts. And I said, even back then, CalArts was expensive for the time, not like it is these days. But at first I thought, well, of course you should go to CalArts. But then the more I saw of what he was doing, I'm like, you don't need to go to CalArts. You're getting the education you need here in the industry with this collaboration that was happening on because it was kind of like being a student, like being all these other artists doing their own projects and working around it. I think the landscape has changed since when we went to CalArts. There's many more opportunities and there's many more avenues to learn about this kind of stuff. When we were, this is pre-internet, guys. This is pre that kind of connection to the world around you that didn't exist. It was kind of like the immediate people that you were with were your connection to they were your knowledge base and what they knew about and what you could bring to them that they didn't know about.
Yeah, and to add to that, like when I started my third year at CalArts, and I was friends with Paul Rudish, and Paul Rudish was a senior when I was a freshman, and he and I became friends, and he started working at Hanna-Barbera, peripherally on this show Two Stupid Dogs, but he was really doing the middle show Super Secret Squirrel. And he called me up and said, hey, we're looking for an art director on this show that Donovan Cook just sold, and bring your stuff down. So I took my stuff down to Hanna-Barbera and got hired on the spot as the art director. And Donovan was like, do you know any board artists? And I'm like, yeah, my friend Rob and Gendy are great board artists and they love cartoons. You should call them in. And so they came in and they got jobs. And so because of those connections we had at CalArts and those friendships we made, and we knew what we were all capable of and knew we were kind of itching to get in there and try to make cartoons, it was just a no-brainer to bring, your friends in and be part of it. And so, and I remember Rob and Gendy were they were roommates and they came out from Chicago, and Paul thought that they were one person named Robin Gendy.
Robin.
So when he met the two of them, he was like, wait a minute, you're two separate people? I thought you were one artist that was coming in. But those connections is like, and you see that perpetuating throughout the entire animation industry. There's a reason Brad Bird was able to go do Incredibles at Pixar, because he did go to school with John, right? Like they knew that these kind of groups of talent and artists at CalArts sort of migrate through the industry together. And I believe Penn and JG were at school together, and Alex was there at the same time. So and they overlapped with Thurup a little bit. So like these groups just sort of enter the industry and sort of cluster together throughout their careers, and that's sort of just how it works.
It's part about school is just meeting the people that you might work with for the rest of your life. That's great. A question for both of you from Dylan. What is the difference between working on an episodic show with little or no continuity and then working on a serialized Netflix story arc show? And how much planning do you have to do in advance for that arc?
More planning than we did.
Yeah.
we found ourselves going back to the earlier episodes as we discovered what happened in the later episodes and adjusting things to make it all work.
Yep.
It's a bigger task to do serialized show. But actually, Craig on Kid, he had this first season all kind of figured out to some extent. So we knew what the broad strokes were going in. But yeah, it's a more complicated thing.
And again, it goes back to the tone. Like, so Wander Over Yonder worked really well as short, little 11 minutes. I think we maybe did a few 22-minute ones, but they worked really well because it's a simple idea. I mean, Wander Over Yonder is essentially a Bugs Bunny cartoon, right? It's, you know, good guy and bad guy chasing each other around the galaxy, all right? So that really worked for 11 minutes, and it was a nice format for that. But sometimes the 11 minutes can get really limiting, because I always refer to it like just splashing around in the shallow end of the pool, whereas telling a longer story, you kind of get to go for a deep dive, and you can go deeper into the story and deeper into the characters. And it's really rewarding to finally be able to do that. You know, it's been something I've wanted to do for a long time. Just the more I get interested in writing and storytelling, it's just the 11-minute format feels so frustrating. And the reason that 11-minute format even exists in the first place is those shows were greenlit by executives who were my age, who grew up watching Looney Tunes on TV. But the Looney Tunes were never designed to be shown on TV. They were designed to be shown in theaters months apart. But when you put them all together, they start like hitting the same notes and feeling like the same thing. But that was like, well, that's what cartoons are. So just every time the cartoon ends, we hit the reset button and it all starts over, and the coyote's going to try to get the Roadrunner again, and he's going to fail, and it just, you become, goes in this loop. But I think a generation of kids grew up with that and kind of felt unsatisfied with that. You know, they grew up with shows like The Simpsons that had longer story arcs and deeper characters. And so when you saw like younger, new artists coming in, like Penn or JG or Rebecca or Hirsch, they wanted to tell these bigger stories. They didn't want to just hit the reset button, you know, at the end of it and go like, well, we're going to just do another one. I remember early on, aren't you joking? Like, Alex didn't want to make The Mystery Kids, right? Where it was just new mystery of the week, right? He had a bigger story to tell. And what happened is audiences were like, this is what we've been wanting. This is what we've been wanting for so long. So when those types of shows started happening, people like me who were like having to do just those kind of random 11 minutes were like, can we do this now? Can we tell bigger stories now? Please, please. So when Netflix came along, it was just like, perfect. This is what I've been wanting to do for years. And it's just really great that audiences are more open to that they want to see the character grow and change and learn, you know? I wish we could have done that on some of the other shows. You know, people always criticize me like, why didn't Blue ever learn a lesson? I'm like, because I wasn't allowed to. You know, he had to start back and, you know, do the same thing.
I can't even imagine Kid Cosmic as like a Roadrunner cartoon.
It wouldn't work. It wouldn't make any sense. There would be no reason to make the show.
Oh, you know what? I actually came up with the idea in 2009, and I started thinking about it then. But as I was kind of walking through it in my head, I'm like, I can't do this as 11s.
Sure.
This needs to be serialized. So I just put it away for years.
Yeah.
And then as soon as these new things started happening, I'm like, oh, maybe I can bring this out again.
Also, I think another influence on that generation was the, you know, more and more familiarity for a Western audience with anime and the bigger stories that those cartoons usually are telling. You know, that was something that was just starting to kind of hit when I was doing Teenage Robot. And I would have loved to have done a serialized version of Teenage Robot. We got a little bit of serialization snuck in the corners of it, but it was so minimal. It just wasn't something that the networks were interested in. But then when anime, you know, through Cartoon Network exposing kids to that, and just kids finding it on video and then DVD and all that, and like, you know, the more they got exposed to that, the more the Western audience wanted those kind of bigger stories. You know, and with Akira and all, you know, it's kind of slowly started integrating in. That was a huge change that kind of happened while Craig and I's career was just, you know, moving along.
Gotcha. Cool. From Nicole, I'm currently a high schooler who'd love to work in cartoons. if you don't go to college, does that prevent you from getting any jobs in the animation industry? I could answer that, but you guys go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, we just talking about the exact example of Alex Kerwin, who never went to school. Now, like Craig was saying, he comes from an artistic family, like surrounded by artists. It was in his blood, and he went to art high school. So he kind of was just kind of training himself before most people tackle that kind of thing seriously. I think most people benefit from going to some sort of art school. Certainly it's very, very expensive. I don't know that I would recommend someone go to CalArts and pay $40,000 or whatever, $50,000 a year they're trying to get out of people now. There are ways that you can teach yourself through the internet and through online lessons and all that kind of stuff. But that takes a certain amount of discipline and stick-to-itiveness that, you got to know yourself. Do you have the ability to self-school yourself? Our college is not only just about the lessons that are taught, but like we've already talked about, the people that you meet and the people that you collaborate with. So there certainly is a benefit, but the cost benefit is, it's something. I was very lucky that my parents could afford to send me to CalArts for 2 years. Not everybody can, most people can't do that today without some sort of financial aid. Gendy wouldn't have been able to go to CalArts if it wasn't for the financial aid he got. That was vital. And then we're talking back when it was, 10%, 20% of what it costs now. So it's a hard decision. I'd say you can try and break into the industry without going to an art school. But it's useful. It's useful to at least go for at least a couple of years. Nobody's going to look for a diploma for an art school from you. Craig and I both left after going to CalArts for 2 years. We didn't have any kind of thing that said, stamp of approval from CalArts. We just went there for a couple of years and then went out in the industry. And that was the norm when we were there. Some people went for 1 year and got hired out in the industry. Most people went for 2. When the industry went down and the jobs were less plentiful, then people were going for 3 or 4 years and getting a degree. But I think some exposure to that is useful for most artists. I certainly wasn't ready to get hired in the industry before I went to CalArts. I think Craig could have gotten hired. He was talented enough off the top, but I don't think he would have been he would have been a good artist. I don't know that he would have been the kind of filmmaker that he ended up being, if not for the couple of years we spent at CalArts. Craig, you have anything else you wanted to say?
Well, I definitely worked with people who didn't go to CalArts and found their way into the industry one way or another. But what's great about today is the internet is a really great way to get your work out there and expose it to people. And I wish I had something like that. And just the connections you can make by just putting your stuff online and other people seeing it. Because like Rob said, if I'm looking for artists, I'm not looking to see if they have a certificate of completion from CalArts. I'm looking at their work and do I like their work and can we bring them in? There's a story, our one of our BG painters on Kid Cosmic, her name is Mabel Yee. She's incredibly talented. And the story I heard about her was she was posting her artwork as a college student or as a high school student, forgive me, on Tumblr, I think. And people started seeing it and going, oh, you're not a high school student, you're a professional, you're an artist, you're posing as something. And then Phil Rinda, actually, who works at Netflix Animation, he reached out to her because he was a teacher at CalArts, and he said, are you really in high school? Do you want to try to get into animation? And he facilitated a way of her getting in and being able to do that. But it was because she posted her work online. And so, getting yourself out there in that format can be really beneficial.
Yeah.
You know?
I think
and there are lots of other jobs besides showrunner in the animation industry. Like, don't pin your career hopes on the idea that you've got to have a show of your own right away. You shouldn't have a show of your own right away, honestly. You need to.
I am so thankful. Here's an interesting story. When I was working on Two Stupid Dogs prior to the What a Cartoon program, I heard that Fred Savert was looking for new ideas for new shows. So I took my student film for Powerpuff Girls up to the Hanna-Barbera development department. I played it for one of the development executives, she said, I'm really not supposed to do this, but I'm going to bypass the whole development department. I'm going to take you down to Fred Seibert's office. I'm going to show this to him.
Oh.
I showed it to him. This was 1993. He said, this is great. Let's do it. I then walked back in the trailer where we were all working. I think Rob is probably the first person I told. I said, we're making Whoop-Ass Girls as a show. And that was 93. I had not done anything before. But then in the interim, and so I started negotiating a contract for a series. And then Fred was like, whoa, we're not going to pick up series. We're going to do shorts, but we want to do a short with you. So that all changed. But if I was to make Powerpuff or Whoop-Ass Girls into a series in 1993, it would not have been good. It would have not, but I just didn't know enough. And it was the years we spent working on Dexter's Laboratory and figuring out how to make cartoons, like the training we had just through that process made Powerpuff a better show.
And if we had made Dexter right out of college, Dexter wouldn't. We got hired on Two Stupid Dogs and had a couple of years working on a show that wasn't from our creative group, just figuring things out and figuring out what worked for us and what didn't work for us with a group of characters that we didn't have. We wanted those characters to be good, but we didn't have the kind of emotional investment in them that any of us would have had in the characters of one of our group. Like Dexter was Gendy's idea, and it would always be Gendy's idea, but Craig and I put a ton of ourselves into those characters, partly because it was Gendy's idea and because we were good friends with Gendy and we wanted it to be good and we thought we could bring something to those characters. But if we hadn't had the experience of working on Two Stupid Dogs, Dexter's wouldn't have been as good as it was. And we learned stuff throughout Dexter that then Craig applied to Powerpuff. So I don't think anybody should come out of school with the focus being that they're going to have their own show first thing.
That is the next.
There's going to be an exception. Someone could, there's
next,
maybe a Mozart out there, Mozart of cartoons out there that can do that. But like, I think everybody benefits from working on other people's stuff before they have the opportunity to do their own show. It's good to have that kind of experience, just a practical experience of seeing what it takes to do a show without it being on your shoulders. Even if you're close by working with one of your friends who gets a show, that experience helps you to understand. Though nothing will help you fully understand until you have your own show.
Right. Yeah, and like if you just look at the people who were show creators, they all were board artists on a show prior to them getting their own show. And you can kind of just go through all the shows. Like, Steve Hillenburg storyboarded on Rocko's Modern Life before he did SpongeBob, right? JG and Penn were on Flapjack. And I think maybe
so was Hirsch. So was Alex Hirsch.
They were on Flapjack with Thurp, and Thurp was on Powerpuff for one of the later seasons. So like you kind of embed yourself on a show, kind of learn how it is, and then while you're on someone else's show, you sort of like go, well, here's what I'd want to do if I had my own show.
Yeah.
Here's how I would do it, and so that kind of gives you the idea of how you might create and develop your own show. Then you go off and do your own show.
I think it really would help to work on other people's shows before you just jump right in and do your own.
Yeah.
You learn so much.
Yeah.
This is from Elizabeth. Hi, I'm a 10th grader aspiring to be a showrunner. What are your tips for high schoolers?
Draw.
Learn to tell stories.
Yeah. Draw and write.
And one thing I always try to think of when developing a show, a lot of people come up with these really elaborate concepts and they get into the weeds of the concepts and how the story's going to be. That's not what executives want to see. They want to see characters that they can engage with. And also, it sounds a little cliche, but the so-called elevator pitch, or 7 words, try to describe your show in 7 words, is a really good exercise. I found to just kind of work through what your idea is about. Like that elevator pitch is basically, I've got a few seconds to tell somebody my idea. How would I say it? And, shows like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, that's the pitch. It's a foster home for imaginary friends. It's in the title. Right? You don't need more than that. And that's enough to get somebody going, oh, tell me more about that. I'm that sparked my interest. So that's kind of a good exercise to try to distill your show down into some simple, pitchable essence.
Same with Teenage Robot. It's in the title, the description.
Very helpful.
Anonymous question. What were the main inspirations for both of your shows, Teenage Robot and Powerpuff Girls? They were the best shows for a young girl to grow up on.
The main inspirations for Powerpuff for me were the 66 Adam West Batman show and Underdog.
Awesome.
That's so specific.
Very
That's great.
very specific.
For me, it was the 1930s cartoons that I mentioned as an aesthetic, the aesthetic of the show. But Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a huge influence on the show, and ironically, Powerpuff Girls. In that, I know part of the reason why Teenage Robot got picked up was because Powerpuff had been a success, and that I was associated with Craig, and I very much didn't want to ape his show. So because our styles are similar, and because our aesthetic is similar, and because our storytelling is similar, one of them, it was inherent in the idea from the beginning, but Jenny is a reluctant hero as opposed to the Powerpuff Girls, who are very enthusiastic heroes. Jenny's looking for something different, and the inner conflict in that show is that this is what she was born to do. This is what she was literally built to do, is be a superhero, and it's the one thing she really doesn't want to do. And how she squares that circle is kind of the journey that she goes on as a character.
Cool. They're kind of opposites in a way, because Powerpuff Girls are super like, let's go fight crime, and
yes,
sort of, yeah.
I mean, they were both created. You know, they were created to be something else. They were created to be the perfect little girl, and they turned into something they weren't intended to be.
Yeah.
Whereas Jenny was exactly what she was intended to be, but doesn't want to be.
Yeah. From Eric, what are your options job-wise after being a showrunner? And I guess I'll add to it, would you ever want to be more than a showrunner, either of you?
Well, let me answer that one, because Craig has continued to be a showrunner and I have not. It depends what you're, I mean, you can continue to do shows and shows and shows. After Teenage Robot, I was pretty burnt out and wanted to do something different. And I literally was going to take a year or so off, except Craig came to me and said, I want you to come. I found an opportunity at Cartoon Network to work in development and to kind of steer the direction of the studio in terms of what shows they pick up. And so that felt like a interesting idea to me, to kind of take a broader look at things, kind of dip our toe into the water of being an exec in a very, I never wanted to think of myself that way, but that we were kind of execs, bringing other artists and giving them their opportunity. So it depends on where you want to go after that. Other opportunities will present themselves. Having your own show definitely puts you on a different level in terms of how you're perceived of in the industry. If you have a successful show, of course, then that can lead to the ability to create other shows, as Craig has done. My show was never a rating success. It's the reason it got canceled after three seasons of 7, maybe going on to 4 or 5 or whatever SpongeBob is on now, 52. I don't know. I've never had it in my gut to create another show for myself. I've never had the idea that really would prompt me to do so. Where I've ended up being, luckily, is being, kind of a core creative participant in other people's shows. Starting with, I worked a little bit on the end of Foster's while we were also working with Craig, and then I went on to work with Lauren on My Little Pony, and then Hirsch and with the Houghton brothers on Big City Dreams, and now back with Craig again on Kid Cosmic. That's a very comfortable space for me, which is being creatively involved in an upper level, but not having the whole show on my shoulders. I enjoy that. It gives me it satisfies the creative urge I have to make a creative contribution to things. If you have a show that is respected within the industry, whether it's rating success or not, those kind of opportunities to basically collaborate with somebody else will probably present themselves, because it is very hard to have your own show and you need collaborators that you can rely on, as we've said before. So if you go out there and create a show and then someone that you either you already have a friendship with, or who sees your stuff and says, hey, that person really is vibing on the kind of stuff that I'm interested in, you'll probably be, part of a creative team on other shows in the future.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I like working with someone with Rob, other than he's one of my best friends and I've known him for a long time, is because he's made his own show. The one thing I've learned about running a show that for me is essential, you have to have a number two. You have to have a second in command that you can share the burden of the show, because as we talked about, you are looking at everything at all times, and you try to move things through production as fast as you can, but that doesn't always happen. I always refer to like getting bogged down in production like Tetris. Like, you're trying to delete those blocks and keep things moving, but every now and then it piles up and you've blocked and you've got too much on your plate and you can't get through it, and it holds up production and it delays everything. So having somebody like Rob, who I can say, I don't have time to go to the records, you go work with the voice actors, I know your instincts are going to be right and you're going to know how to direct them, and you know the material, you're going to be great at doing that. And so being able to like take a huge chunk of just the workload and, give it to somebody else to kind of carry that load is essential. Like, you just have to have somebody like that. And so that is another, job opportunity where you may not be the guy running the show, but you're very creatively involved in it, And I think that's one thing Rob did with Gravity Falls is, Alex hadn't run his own show, but Rob had. So he was there to be like, here's how this stuff gets made. Like, here's how we do this. And I think it's such a really interesting role, but to me, that's essential. And it's also good just to have another person to play catch with. Like, if you've got an idea or something you're thinking of, you can just go, does this work? Does this make sense? Should we do this? Should we make this change? Or should I just let it go? It's nice to have that other opinion. And so I've always had, that person on all of my productions.
Cool.
Yeah.
From Veronica, with pitching shows now in a COVID world, do you have any advice on getting into the pitching room during this crazy time? Are studios taking pitches more now since live action's kind of slowed down by social distancing?
I don't know, Craig, you have any idea of whether Netflix has increased its pitching ferocity? I mean, Netflix animation is a new concern, and they're very much hitting the ground running and taking a lot of ideas and producing a lot of content. I don't know what's going on in the other studios. I mean, it would be speculation to say how do you pitch a show during COVID, because neither one of us has done it.
Yeah, I would expect just Zoom like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's going to be. You're going to be talking to somebody over Zoom just like this and holding up your artwork in front of them, or I'm going to present now, and then showing them, an animatic you made. It's a little difficult. It's but the personal touch is going to be a little bit removed, obviously. And that's a problem only because part of what an exec is buying when they buy your shows, they're buying you. They're buying your vibe. They're buying who they think you are and how you present yourself. Craig and I are both old men, and talking over computers is not natural to us, but if we can get used to it, I think anybody who's young and is kind of grown up with computers as an essential part of their life, and communication through computers as a part of their life, should be fine. How you go about doing it, I don't know. Neither one of us have had to do that. But I do know that, studios are definitely still looking for new stuff, and animation is definitely a favored child right now because of the hiccups with live action. We, as part of being in Netflix, we are on these email chains where we see new hires of people like, these people have gotten hired on these shows in this position, and there's titles of shows that I didn't know anything about before COVID started. So they're definitely picking up new ideas and new shows. They're still looking for ideas, and Netflix is a bottomless pit to throw your idea into and get to make it. Which is mostly a blessing, a little bit of a curse. It's going to be on a network that has 1,000 other shows from people to choose from, but my experience, and Craig can talk to this as well, is they've let us, the expression is have your head, meaning they are very little creative interference in what we want to do. We have both, the risk and responsibility is on us to make Kid Cosmic a good show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a good show. I would watch it even if I didn't work on it.
But one of the most important things is try to get into the industry, because once you get in and people start seeing your work, you'll develop a reputation. That's really the most important things, because like Rob says, with the things with the new hires, people, shows are in different different parts of production at Netflix, and when people are coming off, the recruiting department is like, hey, these people are coming available, are you interested in them? And they want to keep the talent at the studio. They're not trying to just let people go. They're trying to keep them there. And so if you can get into a studio and develop a reputation as an artist that can get their work done and is producers like it, that's really the start.
Yep.
I say this, I think, almost every stream, but to the audience, most of you are children of the internet. Put your artwork on Twitter and Tumblr. Social media, I feel helps so much. When I'm on Twitter and I'll just see an artist that they're like, whoa, cool, I'll just start following them because I really like their artwork. And then, once in a while, Phil Rendo will get a hold of Mabel, exactly like how she got discovered just by on Tumblr posting her artwork. So, there's plenty of places to put your stuff up and get it seen.
Yeah, like I don't know how he went about it, but Jorge had a really fantastic storyboard artist that was working on Maya that he found, I think, online, right? And reached out to him, and he's in Mexico, and reached out to him and said like, hey, do you want to board on my show? And then he got a job working on Maya, and then we were looking for board artists too, and we reached out to Jorge and said, hey, do you have anybody? He's like, oh yeah. This guy Gustavo, he's amazing, and he's in Mexico. He's incredible. But because we're working remotely, it doesn't matter where you're working.
Yeah.
Like our lead character designer on Kid Cosmic is in Canada.
Yeah.
It's you can work anywhere now, and because of how everything's so digital, that's how we're all working anyway. So we're sharing all of this stuff. So and Gustavo's doing incredible work on our show, and it's just great to just be able to find these people that you may not have had a connection to because they weren't in the building or in LA with you.
Yeah. And I think this is okay to share, but when, before COVID, when we were at the studio making Kid Cosmic, it was because there's so many people who work on Kid Cosmic that are not in LA. What was there, 15 or 16 of us in the building actually? It was a really small crew, and the whole rest of the crew was all over everywhere else. Mm-hmm. And we did that before the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
It could, it can be done. You don't have to be in LA proper. Yeah. A question from Justin for both of you. What creator or work inspires both of you recently? Any new stuff you guys are into?
Well, I have a 4.5-year-old, so I'm watching a lot of preschool stuff. So there's some really great preschool shows that I'm really into. It may not be what everybody's into, but there's a show out of Australia called Bluey that my daughter and I love. There's a show out of England that we watch religiously called Sarah and Duck, and then Storybots on Netflix is amazing. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure a lot of the people on here aren't watching preschool shows, but that's sort of what I'm currently ingesting and just watching shows for younger audiences. But you know what, honestly, I don't watch a lot of animation. I've been doing it every single day of my life for 30 years. So at the end of the day, as much as I love cartoons and I love animation, I don't want to watch more of it. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons is I know I can see the puppet strings. I know how the sausage is made, so it's hard for me to watch a series and just enjoy it for what it is, because I'll watch it and go, oh, that scene turned out really good, or how'd they get away with that joke, or wow, those paintings are great. And I can't even see it as a show, and it's just something I've found about myself just because I know too much about the inner workings of how it works. So I tend to not watch other animation. Usually when there's a new show, I'll check it out. I'll watch an episode or two and go, oh, that was great.
Yeah.
I like that. Good job. And then I don't get deeply involved in any series anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar pattern, which is, I don't watch a lot of animation outside of the stuff I'm working on. I have to say I was heavily influenced by Alex Hirsch when I worked on Gravity Falls, creating it with him. He brought a very, for good and for ill, he brought a very, very prime time attitude towards the show, which is, it's a little bit insider baseball, but basically in prime time, you have a lot more money, a lot more time, and a lot more chances to fix things than you do in normal daytime television animation. The Simpsons, Family Guy, which I've worked on briefly, these shows will get animation back from overseas and decide that a joke isn't funny anymore and spend the money to do a whole new scene or a whole new sequence and send it out again. We never do that on daytime television. You have it figured out the first time, you let it go, regardless of what do you think of it when it comes back, that's what you're stuck with. Alex was not satisfied in that way. Because when he found out that we could change dialogue in LA because we could manipulate, because the way we were doing the show, we could manipulate the animation and manipulate mouth shapes and actually create, to a limited extent, create new scenes. We were changing the story when it came back from overseas. We were in the way you would on a primetime show. We were not set up to do that. Now, that's from the outside, from the exec's perspective, that's a nightmare. But to his credit, I cannot think of a single time when we did that and did that very painful thing that it didn't make the show better, that the joke wasn't better, that it didn't enhance the story. We didn't do it a lot, but we did do it enough that it was a thing. That was inspiring to me, and only in that because I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the very, very critical eye that Alex brought to his own work. Nobody was less satisfied with the story that Alex came up with than Alex. It could be frustrating as a collaborator with him sometimes, but it was a way he pushed himself in a way that I really admired. And it's not something that I do for myself all the time, but it is an attitude that I try and bring into my own stuff when I am creating things. A lot of time you just run out of time in animation, and you can't necessarily you can never make the ideal version of any story because you're doing it on a budget and you're doing it on a schedule, and eventually you have to put it on the air. But taking a critical eye and looking at something and saying, can it be better? Does this make it better, or does it just make it different? That's something that any creator would benefit from, to take that moment to do that. And just, try and be as honest with yourself as you can be. When you're new into the industry and you're pitching your first idea, that idea is so precious to you because you've never done anything before, and this is the first time you're putting something up for someone else's approval or disdain. So if that disdain comes in the form of notes or I don't like it or whatever, it can really feel like it hits your heart. But the benefit you get is you create more and more things, is that every single idea is less precious to you. And maybe that sounds like a bad idea, but it honestly isn't, because your ability as a creator is not dependent on any one idea you come up with. The longer you work, the more ideas you come up with, the more you are able to make that engine turn on again. It gives you a form of confidence that you can't have as a young creator, because you realize, I've done this before, I'll do it again. If this one doesn't work out, the next one will be better. So you become less precious with any script, any cartoon, any series of characters you come up with. If you create another one, you're going to be able to do it again. So it makes the criticism less painful, and it makes you able to look at criticism from other people and from yourself more objectively. Because your whole career, what it feels like your whole career is riding on this idea, it really isn't. Even if you have 5 no's. Before Teenage Robot was my show, I wanted Mina and the Count to be my show. After Mina was clear Mina and the Count wasn't going to be a show, I created like 4 other sets of pilots before I happened upon Teenage Robot, and none of those became shows. They only were a single 7-minute pilot. And I wanted all of those things to be shows, but they didn't end up being a show. But eventually I got the yes after a series of no's. I think that's an important lesson for anyone who has aspirations to create their own stuff. You need to realize that no one creation of yours is a complete reflection on who you are as a creator.
Yeah. And even I'll add to that. When I first did my first short for Powerpuff Girls, and we focus tested, I'm sure people have heard this story. We showed it to a group of 11-year-old boys, and they said, this is the worst cartoon that has been ever made, and whoever made it should be fired. Well, I'm sitting in the room with all the executives watching these 11-year-old boys destroy the show. And I was like, I went back to the studio and I started redesigning the characters, and I gave them fingers and I made them more accessible. And I was like, oh, they didn't get it. And Mike Lazo from Cartoon Network called me and said, like, hey, Craig, I hear you're changing Powerpuff. Don't. We like it. It's really good. And he goes, what was really interesting is you got an extreme reaction out of them. So there was something about it. They wanted to grab hold of it and like it, but you didn't give them enough information, or something was missing. And I kind of took that to heart. And he goes, Lazo said, if I got a neutral reaction, like, yeah, that was okay, that's the thing he would have been scared of. But I took that criticism and went, what did I do wrong? Wasn't I not communicating? How was I not telling this idea clearly? And what I realized I was doing is I had been making it in my head for so long. I made an episode that was like a third season, middle of the season episode. And I'm like, no, you gotta go back to the very beginning of the idea and go, here's these 3 little girls. They're made out of sugar, and just kind of step the audience through the idea and introduce them, even though it seems like old hat to you and you're like, well, that's boring, but that's what the audience wants, and tell them the story. Who are they as characters, and why should I like them? And don't be so ironic or high concept-y, right? So that focus test was an invaluable lesson for me. Even though it was painful, I really learned how to communicate my ideas better. Yep.
Thank you both so much. This is like the most informative stream out of all time. From Gage, what is the process like moving from one studio to the other? Is it scary when you're off on one show suddenly and then need to find new work?
You put yourself in a box and you move that box to your new office.
Yeah, you have a box full of toys, cartoon toys, and you just move all your cartoon toys to another place.
Yeah, and every studio has a different vibe and a different agenda, and you just sort of try to like get in there and figure out like, well, how does this place operate? I was very fortunate that I was there on the ground floor when Cartoon Network was being built, so I feel like I was integral in helping build that studio. And similarly at Netflix Animation, I was one of the first shows and artists hired there. When I took the tour, there wasn't even a studio. There was an empty building they were giving me a tour of, like, oh, we're gonna put this here and put this here and put this here. So like, I felt like, well, it's my job to help build this place into part of what it can be. But every studio is different. When I went to Disney, it was just like, okay, how does Disney operate? How does it work? And just trying to navigate that and what it is, they're looking for and what they like. And you just kind of try to, do your best work in whatever environment you find yourself in,
Cool. And I would add on a maybe what the question might be also asking, which is like on a more of a like cog in the wheel level, like if you're an artist working as a cartoon, as a character designer, a background artist or whatever, and that your gig's gonna end, I gotta go look for a gig somewhere else. If you're lucky, you'll get a gig before your first gig is over with, but if you're not, one thing I learned after the first season of Two Stupid Dogs was you better have some money saved up. So you want to have a rainy day fund. You want to have 6 months living expenses if you can. Save a bunch of money so you don't have to take the next job if it doesn't suit you, just to keep a roof over your head. Craig has mostly been creating his own shows, so he's liked everything he's worked on. I've been privileged enough that when I wasn't creating my own shows, I've been able to pick shows that I thought were a good fit for me because I never felt a financial imperative to take whatever came next.
Gotcha.
Because after very painfully having $0 in the bank and that first season of Two Stupid Dogs coming to an end and having to put everything on my credit card for a while, I've always had money saved up. So I knew if I can't work for 6 months, I can work for a year, I'll be fine. You want to have that flexibility and that power to say no to ideas that don't suit you, and wait for something that's going to fit you better.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is even though the studios are separate, the industry of artists are all sort of interconnected.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I know when a show is ending production.
Mhm.
Like, oh, they're finishing a show over at Warner Brothers, or this show over at Cartoon Network's ending. And immediately you're like, who's on there? Who's available? Can we get them over here? So
Get around the grapevine.
right, yeah. And so people kind of just cycle through different studios within the industry once you get in. That's why it's really important to get into the industry, because then you can build yourself a reputation. And then, you know, we're always just looking around like, hey, this show's coming to off production. There's going to be people available.
Usually,
there also is definitely like kind of a vibe thing going on in the industry where the gossip is things are good over here right now, and people migrate towards that studio. Like, oh, Disney is really looking to, you know, make some new shows, and people move in. Like Craig moves over to Disney and says, yeah, it's fine over here, it's good. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll go over there and work with this new guy Alex Hirsch on his show. And you know, and then more the, you know, people that you know move to a new studio and you're like, hey, that sounds great. And that's definitely happened with Netflix recently. Like all of a sudden Netflix came out of nowhere. Netflix didn't exist, you know, 2 years ago, and now it's employing tons of both industry veterans and new people that are new to the industry. It just, the opportunities move around town, and it's more about the people you know and what they think of you, and the reputation, as Craig mentions, that you build up.
Yeah, it was like when we were still at the studio, like every day in the cafeteria when we'd be eating, you'd be like, hey, you're here. Wait, are you here too?
Mhm.
And like,
Oh yeah.
Showing up like, oh, I'm at Netflix as well. It's amazing.
That was great. Every day, just someone, you're here too. This is great.
Yeah.
Or someone not there and you know they're working somewhere else, and it's like, oh, you came over for lunch, huh? That person will be working here within 2 weeks.
Yeah. I am so sorry that we can't answer everyone's questions. We just don't have enough time. I've got two last ones that I think are good to end on. This is from Eric. He asks, for shorts like Mina and the Count and Whoop Ass Stew, were they funded by a studio or were they all student made? Making a short seems like a really good way to get yourself noticed by a studio.
No, they were funded by the studios. And that's one thing that I get, similar to something I get asked a lot is, how could you let this reboot happen? Why don't you make more Wander Over Yonders? And it's like, I don't own it. I don't own those ideas. And the reason is to make these shows, it costs millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to make these shows. And the network is basically saying, we've got this pot of money and we like your idea, and we're going to invest in you as an idea that you might make us a show that's successful and make us our money that we invested in you back. So part of the deal is, in order for us to give you this money to make this short or this show or whatever it is, you've got to sell us your idea. And no network is going to go, hey, here's all this money to make a TV show, and you get to own it, and then you make all the profits of it, and we're just proud of your success. Yep. Like, that's a bad business model.
Why don't we live in that world? I like that world a lot better.
So it's just the nature of how it works. So when I pitched Powerpuff, I did the short on my own, and they're like, yeah, okay, we'll invest in making this as a series, and but we want to own the characters. And then you work out a deal, and it's not completely bad. You get to participate a little bit, but you kind of got to give up the ownership. That's just the nature of them trusting you, or with your idea. So
I mean, and there may be a little confusion in the question, in that just because of both Craig and I did we did student films that were the same set of characters as then the pilots that we did professionally. So the student films were done as CalArts. That's part of what you do at CalArts, and I'm sure it's similar to other animation schools. Part of your learning experience is you do a short film of your own. And Craig and I both we did an idea every year. And so both of our second year films turned into, professionally produced pilots eventually. But the student film, obviously, we paid for ourselves because we were paying tuition to the institution to go there and have the opportunity to access their camera and their paper and all the pencils and all that and animate those things ourselves. But then those particular ideas then became a professional version, a professional pilot.
Yeah.
Those were, you have a contract where there's an option for the studio to buy those ideas if they go forward with it. In the case of Powerpuff, once it became a series, Cartoon Network owned that idea. With Mina, the reason I was able to do it 2 different places because it never became a series after the first pilot, Hanna-Barbera, and the contract had a term where after that term, the idea reverted to me. And then I was able to give it to, give Nickelodeon the option of buying it as well, which they didn't do either. So again, that idea reverted to me. But when Teenage Robot got picked up, that idea became theirs. So if that explains the things maybe a little bit more on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here we go. Kurwan? Wait, maybe this is Alex.
The others have that name.
Yeah. How do you handle when your show ends, both planning wise and emotionally? I'm sure it's difficult or emotional. How do you handle your show
It depends on the show. When we were doing Powerpuff after the Powerpuff movie, there was a period where they were like, "Do you want to do a 7th season?" And we were like, "We think we're done." We're like, we've kind of, like Rob said, how many ideas of this concept can you come up with to the point where you're just kind of repeating yourselves? So when it came to the end of Powerpuff, it was like, I kind of want to get out while it's still good. You don't want to just let it go on forever. In the case of something like Wander Over Yonder, we had a season 3 that we were really excited about doing, that we really wanted to make. And we had just won the Annie for Outstanding Series, and we were getting a lot of critical acclaim, and we thought like, well, maybe they'll want to do more. But they ended up passing on it, and so that was a bit of a letdown because we were all so gung-ho to do it. But that's just the nature of the business, right? That show never was a massive hit. I always joke that I had to go to the biggest corporation in the world to make a cult hit. But we're proud of those shows and proud of those episodes, and we love the support of the fan base that we got from it. But yeah, that was tough to deal with that. But then, like Rob said, I just come up with another idea, and so that's what I did. I just like, all right, I can't do that. What do I want to do next? And that's where I started going, what? Because of, shows like Gravity Falls, I'm like, people are open to serialization. Maybe I should dust off this show about this Kid Cosmic, and see if I can get some mileage with that one. So that's sort of what you do. You just move on to the next one. Yeah.
When I found out that Teenage Robot wasn't going to get picked up, it was very emotional. There were a lot of emotions involved. I was sad, obviously, and mostly sad because at that point I felt like we'd hit our stride and we could have done another season easily, and it would have been less painful for me to produce it. Part of the problem when you get a series is you're the only one who has it in their head. And you've got to somehow communicate that to everybody, and it means a lot of work for you on an individual basis, either doing the work yourself or fixing other people's work because it's off base. So the production of Teenage Robot was the fulfillment of a lifelong goal for me, and also the most painful thing I have ever done. It swallows your life. So be sure you want to have a show. It's not a glamorous thing to have an animated show of your own creation. It really is it's an artistic goal and an artistic achievement, but it won't be easy. So I had always, when I was in the middle of making it, the light at the end of the tunnel for me was like, After the 4th season, I'm done. I'm doing a 4th season. If they want more, I don't care. I'm taking a break. We only got 3 seasons, so I didn't make that goal. I wanted to do 4 seasons, but strangely, I got the news that we were not picked up right before I went on the first vacation I'd had since Teenage Robot started. And I never had a better time in my life on that vacation. After I got the news, I thought like maybe I'm gonna wallow in it, wallow in the news that my show was not picked up and that this was a failure because I didn't make it to 4 seasons. I was relieved. The burden that came off my shoulders, I had such a great time on that vacation, just enjoying myself and looking beyond the show, which I still had another year to work on to complete. But like just looking beyond it and knowing, it was going to be over. And I actually had a great time working on the rest of the show and just enjoying being with the artists I was working with and enjoying the rest of the process, because kind of the burden of success had been lifted from my shoulders. Like I was proud of what we'd done, but it wasn't going to be some sort of ratings juggernaut out of nowhere. That's why it got canceled. The ratings weren't good enough. And the happy epilogue to that has been that it's still remembered by people a generation later, and that it still has fans now. So ultimately, I feel like it was a success in the long term of things. But for me, being what I thought was going to be a very long depression was really just maybe a week of being sad and then going on this vacation and having a great time and coming back and having a great time finishing up the show, because the burden and the worry about success was kind of gone. So it was just left with the creative process.
And one thing I can add to that, when I think of my shows, I don't think of the cartoons we made. I don't think of the episodes we made. I think of the experience I had. Like if I think of Powerpuff, I don't go to episode 17 or whatever it is. I think of the building we were in and the friends I had and the experience of working on that and meeting my future wife. And so when I think about all my shows, I think about the people I worked with and how fun it was to make that show. And the cartoons are just the byproduct of our collaboration. And I don't even watch my shows once they're done. Once we've shipped them out, I never watch them again. So it's not really about that episode or I stopped making that show. It's just I wanna collaborate again with another group of people that I like working with, and I wanna make things again. And that's what I like being able to do. And as long as I can keep doing that, then that's fun. That's where the fun is. The fun is in the making of it. And yeah, you're pleased with the end result, but I don't define my shows with those episodes.
And the pleasure is seeing that it brings pleasure to other people long after you're done with it. I seldom look back at my own stuff as well. But I remember one time I discovered one of the Mina shorts on YouTube, having not seen it or thought about it for maybe 5 years. And I went, hey, that's a pretty good cartoon. And it took that long for me to be able to look at it objectively and give myself a little pat on the back, as opposed to the process of creation where you're like, is this good? Am I doing the things that are right for this? Will it turn out good? Will people like it? That can be very fraught, and it's kind of nice to remove yourself from the end product. And like Craig says, I broke down in tears as I told my crew that we weren't picked up for 4th season. It wasn't because like, oh, my career trajectory is now thrown off. It's because I was sad that there was going to be a time where I couldn't be with these people on a daily basis because they were going to be gone. They were going to be done working on my show, and eventually it would just be me finishing it up. That's what I was sad about. I was sad about missing a crew that I had assembled and grown to love as if they were my family.
Yep.
It's sad when it's the very, very, very end of the show and there's like 2 or 3 people in the office left and all the empty cubes. Oh, man, they've all moved on to other things
Well, TV animation is a small industry, and you end up seeing again and again.
Yeah, you'll end up working with
them. Again, as Craig and I have proven. So.
I want to thank you both so much. I know your time's valuable. Kid Cosmic is a ton of work, and you guys should be working on it right now. But, thank you for taking the 2 hours out of your busy day to be here and with everybody. I think this was a terrific cap off to the 10th episode I've done of this. And
Well, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure talking with
So
you,
much.
Nico.
It was a lot of
Thank
fun.
you.
Really.
I mean, like Rob was just saying, I miss seeing you guys because of the pandemic.
Right.
I miss the Kid Cosmic crew that I haven't seen since February or March or whenever.
Yeah, this is how we make the show right now, just like this.
Yeah, we make it just by seeing each other on Zoom.
Yeah.
So it's not quite the same. But, you know.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Greg and I like to talk, so thanks for giving us an opportunity to talk.
But yeah, thank you again. And the audience, if you've made all 10 episodes, thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. See you guys soon.